Changing climes, and so changes the moods. Welcome once again to News Analysis. News Analysis, a weekly magazine on current affairs. To begin with the main points in a nutshell. In the US, GOP cites tax cuts and healthcare as main focus. Ayodhya verdict deferred. Clashes in Jerusalem as talks snag. At the UN, Turkey asserts itself in prominent ways. China takes a sharper tone in dispute with Japan. Yemen military attacks a town it says is militant hideout. And now the news in detail. GOP cites tax cuts and healthcare as main focus. House of Republicans on Thursday will issue a legislative blueprint called A Pledge to America that they hope will catapult them to a majority in November elections. Its goal include a permanent extension of all Bush-era tax cuts, repeal of the newly enacted healthcare law, a cap on discretionary federal spending, and an end to government control of the mortgage giants Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. With control of the House, the Republicans said they would seek to immediately cancel any unspent money from last year's $787 billion economic stimulus program to freeze the size of the non-security federal workforce and to quickly cut $100 billion in discretionary spending. But the blueprint, with echoes of 1994 contract with America, does not specify how the spending reduction would be carried out. While the agenda is drafted broadly, offering bullet points of overarching objectives rather than detailed proposals, and any legislation championed by Republicans in next Congress, of course, could be subject to a veto by President Obama. The document represents the most concrete presentation of Republican goals so far this year. Aide said it was intended to show that the party was prepared to govern and that in many cases legislation had already been drafted for many of the proposals in the plan, though specific bill numbers were not cited. The blueprint was also clearly intended to provide fresh ideas to answer allegations by Mr. Obama and Democrats that Republicans simply want to return to policies of the Bush administration. Still, many of the proposals represent classic Republican ideals of small government and low taxes pursued for generations by George W. Bush and other party leaders. Among the specific policy points is a proposal to allow small business to take a new tax deduction equal to 20% of their income. Aide said the proposal was first put forward as part of the Republican alternative to the Democrats' economic stimulus plan at the projected cost of $50 billion over 10 years. Ayodhya verdict referred.
For the 24th
The Supreme Court on Thursday, by an interim order, stayed the pronouncement of verdict by the Allahabad High Court on Friday on 4 title suits relating to the Ayodhya dispute. A bench of Justices R.V. Ravindran, H.L. Gokhale stayed till December 28th the High Court verdict that dismissed a special leave petition (SLP) seeking a direction to defer the judgment for exploring the possibility of an amicable solution to the dispute. Clashes in Jerusalem as talks snag. With Israel's construction freeze on Jewish settlements in West Bank scheduled to end this weekend, Israeli and Palestinian negotiators were seeking an elusive formula on Wednesday to keep their peace talks going, while both sides warned if the talks ended, violence could erupt. As if to illustrate that warning, Palestinians clashed with Israeli security forces in and around the old city of Jerusalem on Wednesday after an Israeli security guard fatally shot a Palestinian resident of Silvan, a volatile and hotly contested East Jerusalem neighborhood where a few hundred Jewish settlers live among tens and thousands of Palestinians. The guard told the police that he had opened fire in self-defense after being ambushed by stone throwers before dawn. But Palestinians said there was signs that the dead man, Samir Sirhan, 32, had been chased by the guard, and Palestinian spokesman accused the Israeli settlers of carrying out provocations in order to heat up the atmosphere and divert attention away from the issue of Israeli settlement construction. Mr. Sirhan, a father of 5, was a member of Fatah, the mainstream Palestinian party, engaged in the peace talks with Israel. The Palestinian leadership has said that the 10-month moratorium must be extended for the talks to progress, and that if settlement construction started again next week, it would prove that the Israeli government was not serious about making peace. The government of Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has responded that such talks is evidence of Palestinian insincerity, saying that the moratorium was gesture aimed making it easier for the Palestinians to enter direct talks, since they waited 9 months before taking advantage of it. Walking out on the talks now would prove that they were not serious about the peace. Efforts by the Obama administration to get Mr. Netanyahu to extend the freeze have so far been rejected. At the UN, Turkey asserts itself in prominent ways. The United Nations General Assembly often serves as a stage for ambitious countries to project a new image. None has grabbed that opportunity this year with as much vigor as Turkey. In a flurry of speeches and meetings, and one meeting that did not happen, the Turkish President Abdullah Gül defended his country's close ties to Iran. Turkey's muscle flexing has left the United States uneasy, with administration officials worried that Iran obtained access to financing for its nuclear program through Turkish banks, and the Turkey rift with Israel could complicate American efforts to make peace in the Middle East. Israeli officials reached out to Turkey to arrange a meeting this week between Mr. Gül and the Israeli President Shimon Peres in New York, but it collapsed amid Israeli claims that Turkey had demanded an apology from Mr. Peres for the flotilla raid, and Turkish claims that Mr. Gül had no time, all of which inflamed a sore that the Israelis hoped had been gradually heating up. Turkey's leaders made no apologies, saying they did not start the fight with Israel, nor are they shy about Turkey's ambitions, declaring that its status as a Muslim democracy, its growing economy, and its location at the hinge of Europe and Asia should make it a central player in resolving problems like the Iranian nuclear program and Middle East conflict. If you look at the issues that are of importance to the world today, Mr. Gül said in an interview on Tuesday, they have put Turkey in a rather more advantageous position. Turkey, Mr. Gül was said, the only country that can have very important contribution to the diplomatic route, with Iran a clear reference to its effort, along with Brazil, to head off last round of United Nations sanctions against Iran. After the United States brushed aside those negotiations, Turkey vetoed against the sanctions in the Security Council. China takes sharper tone in dispute with Japan. Chinese Premier Wen Jiabao strongly urged Japan to immediately and unconditionally release from custody the captain of Chinese trawler, threatening further action if Japan refuses. Mr. Wen's comments were the first by a senior Chinese official in what rapidly becoming the most serious territorial dispute China has faced in a decade. The captain and crew were seized earlier this month by Japanese naval vessels, which claimed the fishing boat rammed them near several uninhabited islands controlled by Japan. The boat and crew were quickly released, but the captain faces charges of obstructing officials from performing their duty and remains in Japanese custody. China is licensed that Japan would apply to its laws and Chinese nationals, and argues that the issue is one of diplomacy, not of legal system. Known as Senkaku in Japanese or Diaoyu in Chinese, the islands have been in dispute for decades, but Japan has mostly turned back Chinese vessels that approach too closely.